Good morning, everyone, and welcome to this cheery, atypical Comox Valley December morning. No cyclone bombs, no atmospheric rivers. I think we need to come up with some new terms. That being said, welcome to the Electoral Area Services Committee meeting for Monday, December the 16th, 2024. This is a special meeting because we had so much work to do before the end of the year. So these guys can get on with the business of budget coming up. Just to let you know, we have washrooms in the back through on the right-hand side. There's a couple of washrooms there. Best way to get in there is to actually push the door open, because if you press the button, you have to wait forever. And then, of course, to get out, you have to press the button to unlock the door to get out. The other thing is, if we do have any kind of a emergency, then our mustering point is out on the front parking lot. And as you can see, we have doors on the side and doors where you came in, as well as right here is what, so that's the exit points. Okay, we are going to start the meeting with our recognition of the traditional territories of Comox First Nation, on whose land we have the great privilege to hold our meeting today. We're going to start off with what we call a delegation follow-up. When we have a delegation, we usually do a follow-up on the following meeting rather than trying to invent things on the fly. So we run it by staff. So I'm going to turn it over to the CAO for the summary of the delegation from the Beaufort Association, Inclusion in Action.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And yes, as noted, when delegations present, there's typically no action taken at the time of the meeting, but we always try to come back the following meeting to provide you some context. And if there is further action that you want to take, then that would be a resolution for consideration here today. In the case of the Beaufort Association for Inclusion and Action, they are recipients of a rural community grant, and they would submit an application for rural community grants again for 2025. And in particular, there was reference to the pet treat bakery and potential for offering pet treats, dog treats with dog licenses that are being issued. So staff are actively having conversation with that social venture and identifying if there's any opportunities to be had there. With respect to the rural community grant, that will show up to you in the new year with your other grant requests.
So this year, if I may, that's a great synergy there between the pet bakery and dog licenses. I think it's perfect. But as far as the grant this year, we are still entertaining the applications this year at the same time. Then next year we're going to move it to the fall, right? So this year we're still on track for applications before the end of March. It's January. Okay.
Yeah, the applications will come to you earlier in 2025, and all of those recipients have been informed of that. And
okay, yeah. So everybody knows. Very good. So any comments on the follow-up, Director?
Yeah, just for full clarity, my understanding is the rural grants were due in mid-October. Is that correct, or something like that? And
I think it was October 15th was our deadline.
Yeah, so the deadline has passed. So basically, staff is preparing the packages for us for adjudication early in the new year.
And we're still entertaining one application from last year.
Later on this agenda, there is a request from Oyster River.
Yeah. So that's the old grant, what's left in the kitty. Right then. So do we need a receipt on this?
You don't.
We don't. So we'll just move on. Delegation follow-up for the Fanny Bay Community Association. Back over to CEO.
Thanks very much. And again, this request spoke to the condition assessment for the Fanny Bay Community Hall, and staff have been in contact with the association and will be looking to bring forward additional information with respect to building repairs. We do understand that at a minimum, there would be a request for some support for the structural assessment of that building. And we'll be presenting more information to you at a subsequent EASC in the coming months. Yeah.
Thank you. And over to Director Harbour.
Yeah, thanks. Just for additional feedback after reflecting on it the last week, on my part. I would welcome a few options on this one. I think we have awareness that the Hornby and the Denman and the Black Creek community halls are funded at a much higher rate than the Bainstown facility service. And we have a request for 600,000 to fix the foundation at the Fanny Bay. It's not, we can help them try to chase some provincial grants, but it seems to me that if we had a higher level of requisition in that service, we could probably take on debt to fund something like that under asset management. So I would be interested to look at options and how we could fully fund it. And I realize that some of those options might require us to up the maximum requisition. But I think it's inevitable. All of those buildings, like Union Bay, has done really well through grants. Royston, it's going to come up. They'll have stuff coming up. Fallen Alders, we help them with their roof. But I think a lot of these facilities, it's funny to me that we're funding them at such a lower rate than comparables in our immediate jurisdiction. And in case of Fanny Bay Hall, it's such a used facility, like we need to help them solve that problem so they can move forward. So I would welcome proposals from staff on higher contribution levels from us.
Okay, thanks, Director, and that's duly noted. We always like to try to present you with options when we come forward, so we'll make some notes on that and look at what those options might be. Of course, you're aware of the history of these services, and there's a story there for every one of them. Yeah, in the case of Fanny Bay Community Hall, there hasn't been we're still embarking on that stronger relationship.
So you can bring back something on the 13th of January then?
I don't know that it'll be the 13th. We're between working through budget and working with the
I know
association.
budgets.
We'll be able to come back to you.
Budget's going to throw sand in the gears. Okay, that sounds good. So any more lights, any more questions? Seeing none. So we have resolution status report. That's not on there. Well, I guess we received it last week. It's just a special meeting, so we don't even need that. Okay, move right into the crux of it. The Comox Valley Agricultural Plan and Implementation Strategy Report from December 11th for receipt. Moving second on receipt. And over to staff.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Lisa Kilpatrick, our Community Development and Resilience Manager, will be introducing the draft agricultural plan. So Lisa, over to you.
Good morning through the chair to the directors. We have Ione, who has been part of this process with us from the beginning, from Upland Agricultural Consulting. She's going to be presenting the plan, giving you an overview of where we've come from and where we are today. And then following, we'll have a discussion on the implementation of the plan. What are the considerations for our existing capacities, resources, both rural and regional, setting the stage for the request for a new agricultural coordinator position, and then also having a discussion around thoughts on the creation of an agricultural service. So I'll pass it over to Ione.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. So thank you very much for inviting me back. I was here a few months ago with an earlier iteration of the draft agricultural plan. And since that time, we've done another round of engagement. And so I'm here to present to you the outcome from that engagement, what we heard, and also walk you through the final revisions that were made since the previous draft, and discuss the implementation plan, which was a big piece of work that was completed over the last few months. And Lisa will also be presenting on the implementation plan as well. And then finally, just going through these final steps. So just a recap of the engagement that's taken place on this project. The Comox Valley Agricultural Plan update began back in November 2022, so just over 2 years ago now. We were able to establish a project advisory committee for the length of the project, and it met 6 times over the last 2 years. During that time, we also had several rounds of outreach to Comox First Nation, and Comox First Nation representatives did participate in helping to pull together some context for the background report. As you know, Comox First Nation has been going through an election and also some other important work within their nation. And so we haven't had much of an opportunity to bring them into the discussions over the last few months, but we have made several attempts. We also undertook several interviews, close to 30 interviews during 2022 and 2023, with key leaders of the agricultural community within the Comox Valley to get their perspective and input as to what the key challenges and opportunities are for the sector. Another group that we engaged with was the associations. So the Comox Valley Farmers Institute, the Mid-Island Farmers Institute, and the Comox Valley Farmers Market Association. Our first round of one-on-one meetings with them were held in February of 2023. And those meetings were held as an important opportunity to hear directly from these interest groups around what their key concerns and challenges were, and to try to integrate some of those thoughts in the early steps of the agricultural plan update to make sure that those concerns were heard. You may recall that in May of 2023, we hosted several in-person community workshops on various topics that we had been hearing as key challenges. And so those were held in the evenings so that they were open to the community and they were very well attended. We also hosted an online version of the workshops in June for anyone who was not able to attend in person. And this year in 2024, we started it off with a second round of meetings with the Comox Valley Farmers Institute, the Mid-Island Farmers Institute, and the Comox Valley Farmers Market Association. And the purpose of the second round of meetings was to present an early draft of the agricultural plan for their input and for their ability to provide some feedback and shape the recommended actions. We also presented the second draft of the agricultural plan to the Agricultural Planning Commission back in June. And then we opened things up for a final round of engagement through an online survey and through an invitation to submit written feedback. And we received 45 responses to the online survey, which was open until the end of September. And we also received 12 letters or emails between July and September as well. This fall, we also had the opportunity to meet specifically with different departments within the CVRD. So we met directly with staff to talk about the implementation strategy to ensure that a lot of the actions were going to be doable with given current capacity, and also to identify where some of the actions may require additional resources. And then we hosted a final project advisory committee meeting last month where we presented this final version of the agricultural plan update. I wanted to highlight here from the survey, one of the key results we heard was that there was quite a lot of support to specifically grow the agri-food economy in the region. There was also a lot of support around strengthening awareness of the Comox Valley agricultural sector and maintaining land protection policies that support producers. So these are some of the results that are presented in a more fulsome engagement summary report as well. In terms of the written submissions that we heard specifically from members of the agricultural community that they wanted to hear more direct reference to the Comox Valley exhibition grounds within the plan. They also wanted to have some clarification on what exactly the role of the CVRD is when it comes to water permitting, allocations, water licensing, and the availability of these. There was also a desire to underscore the impact of residential development, the impact that was having specifically on water availability for agriculture. There was also a desire to have some better alignment and connection with the previously completed Solom River Watershed Agricultural Plan. And the need for a permanent year-round market space was highlighted as well by several submissions. There was also an interest in removing reference to some of the valid issues, but perhaps actions that may not be within the jurisdiction of the CVRD, things like doing research around crop trials, seed collections, and things like that were suggested to be removed from the agricultural plan since the CVRD wouldn't be able to necessarily lead on those. And then finally, there was a desire to see some high priority given for compliance and enforcement of bylaws specifically on farmland, so working in conjunction with the Agricultural Land Commission. I mentioned that we had undertaken a number of staff meetings. So we met with the following departments. We met with long range planning, policy and current planning. We met with communications, recreation services, parks, and water and liquid waste. At those meetings, as I mentioned, we discussed which actions in the plan could be undertaken with existing resources and which might require additional capacity. And we also looked at specific priority levels and timeframes. This helped to inform an implementation strategy, which has been developed as an addendum to the agricultural plan. In summary, some of the revisions that we made since the last version that was before you, we updated some of the actions because since this has been a fairly longer term project over 2 years, some of the actions have actually already been completed or are underway or have been taken on by the Ministry of Agriculture and Food. So we wanted to reflect that. So we did make some changes to those. We also created a new action regarding exploring the feasibility of a water sustainability plan because this would therefore allow for several of the water-related actions to become part of and initiated through that approach. We've also added clearer reference to the Comox Valley Exhibition Grounds and the desire for permanent farmers market space. As I mentioned, we removed some actions that were not within the jurisdiction of the CVRD. We've also connected some newer initiatives such as the tourism strategy as well as aquaculture to the plan, and we added some clarity around the priority categories themselves. So overall, there are some more specifics in the actions. There's some more details, but there are fewer tasks that are not associated with issues that the CVRD can lead on. There are still 5 key areas or themes. We reduced the total number of recommendations to 21 because we were able to consolidate 2 of them. There are a total of 79 tasks associated with those 21 recommendations. And we updated the priority descriptions for implementation, which I'll describe on the next slide. There's now 5 categories of tasks. An implementation plan was created, which Lisa will speak to, I believe. And we've also developed monitoring and evaluation metrics to measure the success and progress of the agricultural plan's implementation. So there are 5 implementation categories. These have been developed based on input from the agricultural community. The first category are actions that are high priority and that should commence as soon as possible and that can be led by the CVRD. And there are 15 tasks associated with that category. Then there are actions that are high priority but that will require relationship building with Comox First Nation, and there are 6 tasks associated with those. The third category are medium priority actions that should commence within the next 5 years, and there are 21 actions there. The fourth are actions that can be completed as the opportunity to do so arises within the next 2 years, and there are 27 tasks associated with that category. And then lastly, there are actions that have already begun, but that do require ongoing support, and there are 10 actions associated with that. So those are all the slides that I have. I hope that you've enjoyed the update, and I'm going to turn it over to Lisa, who has some information about the implementation plan. Thank you.
Lisa?
Great, thanks, Ione. Did we want to pause there for any questions for Ione before we move on to the implementation strategy?
Director Hardy?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks to staff, and thanks, Ione, for giving us the update here on the draft agriculture plan. I did have a question with regards to one of the bullets referring to water permit allocations and the role of CVRD there. So I'm just kind of wondering if someone could maybe refresh my memory with regards to the CVRD's role when it comes to water permitting or water allocations permits. If that's a role for the CVRD, or if that's something that kind of falls within the province. Thanks.
I'm not sure the reference specifically. Maybe Lisa, do you know the reference? Director Hardy's.
I think Ione's presentation talked about, you know, some of the tasks and or what they heard from CVEX, and I think one of the bullets in there referenced water allocations per any.
I can speak to that. Thanks, Director Hardy, for the question. So the context there was that we were hearing from the agricultural community that they wanted CVRD to do things that essentially the CVRD doesn't have jurisdiction to do. And so there was a need for some clarity around what exactly the role of the regional district is when it comes to, for example, permitting residential water hookups to aquifers and things of that nature. There was some misunderstanding within for some members of the community as to what the role and what the jurisdiction is for the regional district. So there was an opportunity to provide that clarification within the agricultural plan itself.
Okay, so that's what was implied in that bullet there on your presentation. And I didn't quite understand what was being stated there, because how I read it was that, the CBRD needs to be more involved in that process. And I was kind of like, I'm not so sure that's our role, but thanks for that clarification. Thank you.
No problem.
Well, I have a couple questions, actually. Well, we have Ione online, and by the way, thank you so much for all of your hard work, patience, perseverance, all those wonderful things. Yeah, when you get we're just speaking of, confusion around jurisdictions on different orders of government and what they have in their toolbox insofar as doing this, that, and everything. So, when I look at this report, it's got a lot of words like encourage, support, advocate, partner, provide information, explore, communicate, engage, work with, recommend, inform. I guess, that's pretty well it in a nutshell when it comes to local government. We have basically our biggest power is the power of persuasion when it comes to senior governments and ministries and ALR and things like that. So, it's hard for the average person to realize we can't wave a magic wand, make things happen. We can facilitate. We can use our regulatory power whenever possible. But then again, when it comes to ALR land, we have very limited regulatory power. So, it's probably, this is the best we can hope for. My question, though, as always, refers to page 12, growing the agri-food economy, number 3.1. It says reassessing CVEX site priority for infrastructure, including a permanent farmers market. And later on in it says, in number 3.3, it speaks to considers the CVEX when for establishing an agricultural service, and the maximum use of CVRD lands, including the Comox Valley exhibition location, e.g. a permanent farmers market, shared processing. We're talking like cut and wrap, chop and bag, aggregation, small food processing, things like that fell under the previous the food hub initiative we did. Then it goes on to say feed and hay storage on site, and that would be very helpful when we're having either equestrian events or the fall fair. Seed saving, but conspicuous by its absence is the elephant in the room, which is the exhibition building, something that's been advocated for 25 years. It appeared on 3 prior plans at the RD. A building that would be a focus point for farming, small rooms for 4-H clubs and whatever, and a larger space for exhibition and larger meetings. So I just wonder, it isn't just me, it's conspicuously absent. It's been left off the table. And I'm just wondering if we can't put it back on there, because when we go, as you probably know, we don't own the service. It isn't our service. It's a regional service that falls under the Rec/Sports Commission that, has other plans for the exhibition site. And if you go back and talk to all the old timers, they'll tell you that was given to the regional district for $1 and was going to be maintained as an agricultural focus. In fact, the Comox Valley Agricultural, or the Comox Valley Exhibition Society, have just recently found some documents from the previous Comox Strathcona Regional District, when Barbara Price was the director for Area B, and when it was in Area B, and she was also chair of that committee on the ag, and it basically said as much, that the exhibition could rent the grounds for $1. Those days are gone. So I just wonder if we can't put that back in there, because if it isn't back in there, I can't support the whole plan, because we need that focus point. We need something for the farmers to actually have and to hold on that site. And it fits all the other boxes. So it just seems odd to me that it was purposely left off. And I do know that there was some late submissions that spoke to it as well, specifically, including this director. So I wonder if you could answer that.
Sure, thank you, Director Grieve. I can answer that. It certainly wasn't purposeful, and I think when we were putting the action together, the concept of referring to the exhibition grounds necessarily would include the buildings, but if it needs to be specifically mentioned there, that's not a problem on my end. There was no purposeful omission or anything like that.
So I'm wondering what the best way is to move forward with revisions to this plan. Do we want to refer it back to staff, or can we make that revision on the fly? The only other one I object to is, and I think it says it right at the end here, when it talks about when it talks about, and this is a big piece of it, the agricultural coordinator position, it says they will meet with representatives from the Comox Valley Farmers Institute and the Mid-Island Farmers Institute to decide if they approve of the short list of agricultural coordinator. And I would suggest that the language you used farther on, it could go on and say, and the Farmers Valley Farmer Market and Comox Valley Exhibition and others. But later on, it just says Farmers Institute and others. If we could put that in there, because as important as they are, the Farmers Institutes are not the be all and end all. There's poultry associations, cattlemen associations. There's, other dairy associations that are part of this mix as well. So I would say and others would be more to the point, rather than specifically just focusing on one or two of all the groups out there. Thank you. Director Arbor?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. On your former point around the CVEX grounds, I mean, if you go to 3.3.1, I think that I'm comfortable that that paragraph is aligned with what you're speaking of. Because 3.3.1 says, consider CVEX in the establishment of a regional agricultural service as an anchor asset, maximizing the use of lands and assets such as the exhibition grounds should be accommodated for the benefit of the agri-food sector. And then there was light. This could involve developing a specific list of needs and wants from the agricultural community at the CVEX location, e.g. permanent market space, feed hay storage, seed saving, shared processing. So I think it captures pretty much everything I heard you say. Just wondering where you see a discrepancy between that and what you would want to see in there.
I think there's a lot of specific reference to an agricultural farmer's building on site, and it's not in there. They talk about storing hay and feed. So I don't think it's risen to the level where I can actually say that in this document, I got some policy to push that forward. So I would really like it to be specifically mentioned. Thank you.
Is that something, so this document is based on the public consultation. Is this something that was missed, or were others than Dr. Grieve really asking for that level of specificity around a building that could be bigger and host a suite of activities? That's question to staff.
I think either Lisa, if you've got information, or Ione, if you've got information, I know that you you responded to Director Grieve, Chair Grieve already on that there was no specific omission, of course, and that we can be more elaborate in the wording of the plan itself. It's a high level plan. It's a strategic document with respect to agriculture, and by nature that I don't think it gets extremely specific, but I can appreciate if there's some extra reference that is being looked for that we can, I'm sure, find a way to incorporate that in the existing goal statements that are presented. I also wanted to just say that in terms of presentation today, I know Lisa's got the second part of this presentation, which is the implementation strategy, and so of course this is your meeting, your document, and we will take your direction on that. But I do think it would be helpful to hear from Lisa on the implementation strategy, and then the committee can give consideration to either the recommendations on the agenda or taking some different direction if there's a referral to incorporate additional materials. I think, Lisa, you'll be speaking to the second recommendation, which is around the ag coordinator itself.
If I may, then I think I made my point about consultation over the ag coordinator, not limiting it to 2 groups, and would bring me a lot of comfort that if there was some mention of Comox Valley exhibition farmers building on site. Because when you talk about aggregation of food, you talk about, storage, all those pieces fit. So I just think it would bring me a lot of comfort because we've been down this road so many times. And here we are at the brink of actually bringing forward a plan. And I think there's enough support out there to at least consider. I mean, it won't happen unless we do have an actual function, because we're not going to get any money from the municipalities towards it. Okay, Lisa, you want to take us to the next step?
Excellent. So I actually printed this document out. It's probably easier to see in front of you than see up on the screen and follow the screen. So I'm not going to walk through this document line by line. What I wanted to do was to really present sort of the approach that we're taking, what we heard, and what the ag plan ultimately is a reflection of what we heard in the community, and a reflection of what the producers and processors feel it's going to take to really strengthen and support the actualization of the vision that we have, the future state that we have for agriculture to be that heart of the valley that it once was, to look at ways that we can support the producers and the processors to do the work that they need to do to support the region in our food needs, but also so that they can find a way to be sustainable. And so the implementation strategy that we have here is a reflection of what we heard, but also a reflection of what we as CVRD staff can do as we move forward. This is a 10-year plan. It is, and I really want to stress this point, we intend this to be a living document. We intend this to be a document that is dynamic, that we look at on an annual basis. We have a monitoring and evaluation process that will be looked at annually. We will be reaching out to our partners annually to see where we're at within the plan and what work needs to be done. And the priority areas may actually be adjusted based on the board's priorities and the priorities that we are hearing from the community. So I think that's really, really important for us to think about as we kind of look forward. This plan and the implementation strategy relies on the involvement of many services and branches within CVRD. So this isn't a situation where we've got a plan that's going to have a couple of staff behind it. This is something that really reflects our rural areas, and as we'll see is within the implementation plan also spans out into a regional focus. It's something that we heard through this planning exercise, is that we have the rural support, we have the electoral areas that have historically supported the producers and processors, and there is interest more regionally now in supporting that sector, as people, certainly through COVID, have realized how important it is for us to support our local agricultural sector. So I'm just going to go through the columns that we have here. And so obviously we have the actions and sub-actions that are generated out of the goal areas. And then we have a column here that's rural and regional. So this is a distinction on two fronts. One is the impact that those actions will have on rural or regional, but also more pointedly in terms of if we look over into the next column, the branches and the branch and services. So what is currently being supported right now through our electoral areas. And so a lot of these actions may be supported through our planning services, some of our engineering services, and some of our community services. If we move over into the next column, we have the partner organizations. So these are groups that we, while the plan is seated within the jurisdiction, as Director Grieve mentioned, it aligns language with our jurisdictional capabilities. We also see moving forward by partnering with organizations in areas that there may be funding available, or is this really important to take a collaborative approach on these actions? And then the final column there is around the priorities, which Ione went through. So the other piece here is that we, in this document that you have in front of you, we have color coded. So we've got green, which really indicates the actions that where we have an existing service, there's a fit with a service, we have resources. Some of the actions may need bolstering with additional resources, for example, with an agricultural coordinator. But somewhere in the next 10 years, we should be able to plan to, within our existing services, to actualize these actions. Then we move into the orange. That's where we have existing services. There may be some limited fit with those existing services. We may need to look at some modification, or at the very least, really bolster resources to move forward. An example there would be around emergency planning. So in order to be able to bring the agricultural community into focus on our emergency planning, we definitely need to put more designated resources into those activities around. So an agricultural coordinator may support some of that, but the reality is just one individual isn't going to support all of these actions, or it will not have the capacity to support all the actions. And then we have yellow. This yellow tends to be tied with the actions that are definitely more regional in focus. There may be no existing service or services that would need a considerable shift, so an amendment in purpose. We do have some regional services that would fall into the category of could be used, and that would be something like our regional growth strategy service. So in the package that we sent out, we did highlight the areas that would be yellow. And so if you look at that appendix B. So appendix B highlights the areas that that we really don't have a service. We don't have the capacity in any way, shape, or form. Some of those do fall into our high priority zones as well right now. And so you'll see that if you wanted to take a look at the document in front of you, you'd be able to see which of those that are in the yellow fall within the high priority that we really don't have a significant resource to support or a service to support that. And many of these, as I mentioned, do fall into a regional category. And so I'll just pause there, just ask any questions on how we're looking at moving forward on implementing this and considering the resources that we have. Okay, great. So I'll just move into the agricultural coordinator. So we did have an opportunity to pilot this role in 2022, 2021, 2022. And generally it was well received from the community. Lacking an agricultural plan and direction was definitely a disservice to that role at the time. And I think that this plan will really provide that direction, will really support the prioritization of the activities for the agricultural coordinator. What staff is recommending is as we move forward, if the plan is approved, that we look at providing including an agricultural coordinator full-time permanent position in the financial planning process for 2025 under the rural areas. And in the first year, at least, the tasks of that coordinator will focus on the rural area needs as a priority. And then as we contemplate how to resource the other areas of the plan that may be more regional, then that agricultural coordinator may, or additional positions would be considered to expand out, to actualize the plan into the regional areas. So we also included a list of the areas where we saw the agricultural coordinator being able to support in that first year. So are there any questions on the ag coordinator?
Director Harbour?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Thanks, Lisa. And I'll just work backwards. So I'll start with the agricultural coordinator position. So I think when this was presented at the board last month, the language was that the coordinator would be supported both rural and regionally. So now today we're hearing this would be just rural in the budget. And then we're wondering where that change came from that presentation to the broader board to now.
Through the chair to the directors, I think from our perspective, from the staff perspective, we see a full slate of activities that could be undertaken within the rural planning service. And so for that coincide with the green listings. One of the recommendations in Lisa's report is that if you approve the plan today, that you then refer that approved plan to the board for a discussion about what regional implementation could look like. So we maintain the view that an agricultural coordinator resource could certainly be used in both worlds, rural and in regional, but we're suggesting that for year one, that you endorse in principle today the concept of an agricultural coordinator position, that you consider funding it through the rural planning service in 2025, and that conversation about future work plan unfold over the course of the next year. I don't want to get into this too much, but in one of the appendices that Ione's report provides, there is some discussion about what an agricultural coordinator position could do. And one of those certainly would be to help scope future years implementation. So that's where we've landed.
Okay, I would have landed elsewhere myself because I think that the rural areas continue to contribute all the time to municipal functions. And this is an area that we've heard interest from the brother board to contribute to something that is a bit more rural focused. And I think if we start with a coordinator that's purely funded from the rural areas, that's likely to stick. I think it's going to be hard to move off. And then I would say, well, is the agricultural coordinator going to look at all at, say, a permanent farmers market space? If it's funded from rural areas, maybe I'll say, okay, well, let's knock that off the list until it's also funded by the rest of the region, right? So that's my thought. But it's a minor point, but it's also a sensitive point, I think, in regards to where we're at with the politics of the valley. In regards to the plan, I love the level of detail, and I think we've come a long way from that CVEX letter we received a couple of years ago, where that was a tough letter to receive for me. Like when they were like, basically, well, you guys don't know what you're talking about as CVRD, and elected officials are clueless about the agriculture. That was the tone I remember. And so it's nice to see that in the last, in the time that we've developed this plan, there's actually a lot of thought that our staff has pulled together, and we've helped facilitate a process where we come up with that level of detail and recommendations. I want to acknowledge that I agree with you, like for 15 years or something, there hadn't been a lot that we had been involved with. So I want to acknowledge the ground that's been covered in the engagement of the community. I guess the only thing, and maybe it's a question and comment at the same time, but the only level that's missing for me is we have a suite of, is it 79? You said 79 actions or something? So, you know, in prioritizing those actions, for me, I go back to those higher level indicators because different actions will have different impacts. Why is the CVRD trying to get involved in the space, right? And for me, it goes back to 2 or 3 metrics that we should track beyond those recommendations, which is what is the profitability of farms and how do the activities that we're suggesting helping that? What is the amount of farmland under cultivation? Is that growing? So those higher level that are kind of like regional growth strategy, sort of dashboard kind of level, I think those should be really clear in the agricultural plan because they would really help prioritize which activities might get invested in and also hold us accountable because we could do those 79 recommendations and not change anything on profitability or amount of farms and crops, right? So it'd be nice to tie some of those actions for me in a strategic plan, like this is an implementation plan and a strategy, like to really tie back that link. How is it gonna help some of those indicators? So that'd be my only feedback, I guess, for today. And we can leave it as a comment if you feel like providing feedback on that if it's been considered, but that's the only one I would raise. Thank you.
Thanks,
I think it
Dr.
speaks to
Harder.
that when it talks
Oh.
about, sorry.
I was just going to mention
ahead,
that
sorry.
in the monitoring and evaluation framework, at the end of the plan, we do have, I believe it's 7 different metrics that we're proposing become tracked. And the first metric does include the amount of cultivated land, as you suggested. We didn't include the profitability metric simply because there's so many factors outside of the control of the regional district that influences the profitability and economics of farms. But that's something that could be considered if you feel it's appropriate to add it in the future. But there are 7 indicators there under section 4 of the plan. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And sorry, I missed that. Well, I would argue that profitability should be included because I think it's as difficult to tie our action to amount of farm that is being cultivated. Like that's also a very complicated scenario, which honestly, the amount of farm cultivated is probably going to be tied to profitability. And so for one example, is say that we're being asked, and I'm being very like high level, but we're being asked to streamline our regulations, right? Or whatever we do in regards to land use planning. You can tie that to profitability. There's a real cost when people have to wait a year or 2 years for something, right? So we can actually quantify some of those things. So as hard as it is to quantify profitability, I would make the argument it's also hard to tie how our actions would link to amount of land under cultivation. But I think it's still worth the effort to have those because we know we won't have a successful farming sector if it's not profitable. And also we'll know if we have a successful program and plan if the amount of land grows. And there's probably, like you say, there's 7 of them that you've identified. I'm sure the other 5 or 6 are super good as well. And yeah, that's thank you. I kind of missed that, and maybe in that table I would have said, okay, this can influence those factors, you know, directly or not. But I'm being too detailed, I think. So thank you.
Yeah, I think that gathering all the information we can is a really important point. I think the last information we had was from 2021, and it says here that 33% of the farms reported making less than 10K a year. So the average return on investment of farms is 4%. And meanwhile, we see other inflationary pressures coming to bear all the way down the line. So, I mean, it's going to be a Herculean task to move it off 4%. But yeah, and also you talk about the the ag market assessment and regional growth strategy, including aquaculture, revenues, labor, and secondary servicing. So, and the other, that was what, 3.2. There's also, yeah, the 3.4 regional food security plan. I think we got a lot of work on our plates here, and we'll know a lot more. Once this thing's established for a couple of years, we'll have all kinds of data we don't have right now.
Thanks for your comments there. And I think the certainly looking to a sector market assessment and growth strategy, we could pull out and identify additional indicators, as Director Greaves mentioned. So I think just moving forward, we really wanted to take this opportunity to also engage you in a discussion or hear your thoughts on a regional service, or sorry, an agricultural service, rural or regional. And so we did include a few questions in there in terms of sort of what your thoughts are. So if you would like to share some ideas, and I think this would just help with the conversation as we move forward to speaking with the board in the event that the committee refers the plan to the board.
And so Lisa, those questions are the page 4 of the staff report. Things like, what do you see as the purpose of an ag service? What would be some of the advantages and drawbacks for a regional ag service versus a rural ag service? Should the expansion of existing services be considered to support the actions in Appendix B? Specifically questions in the report.
Director Arbor?
Yeah, thanks. Well, it's interesting that this plan sort of gives us that option, you know, to move forward a lot of components, but not necessarily with an ag service. I've been in favor of an ag service, I think, since 2019, when our group went to Quebec City at FCM, and we organized a tour in one of the equivalent regional districts there, and they had an extremely vibrant ag service that was shared by all municipalities in rural areas. And they had so many programs, you know, they had programs, some of them that were provincially funded, some that were funded through the regional government, but all of it was living under that kind of service. And you know, they were placing new farmers with farms, matchmaking. They were doing new crop experiments. They were like, it was everything, right? So that was really eye-opening in terms of the level of support that a small government can actually provide. And I think I made the comments on the campaign trail at the Dove Creek Hall during the election that, you know, I said, you care about what you budget for. And in the context of a regional district, an agricultural service to me is kind of because I think if you don't and you have the agricultural coordinator kind of live vaguely under some function as we've had in the past, it's just you're not getting the attention. And also when you talk about all these different branches that need to be involved, like it would be a case over time, like who's in charge of this thing? Whereas if you have the service, then everybody, at least the senior directors here, you know, get together in front of the table, and we got to put this budget together each year and think about assets and long-term financial planning and all that. So it starts to be a much more ongoing concern. So I know there's limited appetite these days for new taxes and new services, but that's why for me it's so important that we nail that we can show that we're making a difference in 5 or 10 years. And I think that the plan you've constructed show some good elements of us being useful. Another indicator, but I was thinking of, which is more facetious, is, you know, do we see a reduction in complaints of saying the CVRD doesn't do anything for agriculture? Like, we can probably track that. You know, and but I think having that comprehensive list does make me think that there's definitely enough there to at least consider a regional service, but understanding that there's quite a process, public process to get there, to establish it and all that. So it'd be nice if we could get up and running this coming year without a service and show some wins, and show some potential to say that if this was properly situated in the CVRD, we could actually grow this properly. So welcome my colleagues' views on that, but I'm personally favorable.
Yeah, thanks. I agree with a lot of the comments that Director Arbor has put forward. With regards to getting an agriculture coordinator up and going here within the CVRD, I think it's so important for us right now. I know our staff here internally capacity is maxed out, and to really get this program or service moving in a positive direction, I think we really need to have somebody that's completely focused on it and not just working off the side of the desk. And that's no disrespect to our staff or to our consultants, because they've done a wonderful job over the last 2 years of getting us where we are today with regards to this plan. I appreciate Lisa's comments with regards to that this is a working document, and it's something that will be continuously reviewed and amended, which to me is a huge step as well. I mean, we had an agriculture plan that was in place for about 20 years, and we finally did a review on it, year 19 or 20. So I think for us to make sure that we're recognizing the fact that this is a working document is really important. Again, going back to the agriculture service, and whether it's a regional service or a rural service, and I think it's, going back to Director Greaves' comments earlier with regards to, do we vote on this thing today for budgetary purposes in 25? I think that there really does need to be a strong conversation with rural and municipal governments on this one, because quite often I do hear a lot of the times from folks from the city of Courtenay or the town of Comox with regards to it's so important for food security and making sure that there's a service available that promotes the agriculture sector here. I think we all recognize the importance of the agriculture sector, but it's time for us to start developing a plan that really has some nuts and bolts to it that we're all working together on, not just area A, B, and C. Yeah, even just the fact that, we've talked a little bit about the farmers market and how important that Saturday event, or sometimes a Wednesday event as well in the summertime. It's not just constituents from area A, B, or C that are going and going to that market and enjoying it and purchasing the fruits and veg, etc., from those folks within the market. A lot of the time it's somebody from the city of Courtenay or the town of Comox or the village of Cumberland. They look forward to going to that event every Saturday. So to me, again, it's not just a rural event, it's a regional event that takes place every weekend. And to me, that's all the more reason why we should be looking at it as a regional service and not just a rural service. Anyways, those are just some of my comments at the time right now. Again, just recognizing the fact maybe also that in the presentation that Lisa provided to us, the hard copy is 3.31, and then there's 3.32 that kind of makes mention, Chair, of a food hub and some of the associations that might be involved with it. So I'm just wondering again, based upon that language, if that's where some of the concerns that maybe you have brought up earlier with regards to food preparation, food processing, etc., if it would fall under 3.32 as well as 3.31. So those were just some of my comments, Chair. Thanks.
Well, I think that I may take the contrary view here, especially to get this thing up and running, because we all know that all roads lead to Courtney. And with their massive voting power at the board, quite often anything that doesn't happen to City of Courtney doesn't get support. You gotta have all the sports centers have to be here, even the soccer pitches have to be here, you know. Any trails in Cumberland are supported. I think that, you know, that not to be disingenuous here, but there is that mentality. And I think we have the freedom at this level to actually direct stuff that makes sense to the rural areas. And believe me, there is an urban-rural divide on this. I understand, you know, all the advantages we could have if we did have a regional service because of the tax dollars. Right now, we see, you know, about like our tax dollars, you know, mostly supporting programs and facilities in the city. You know, and I don't think, I think that's just, you know, it's not even conscious, it's just self-serving. So I'd be more inclined to get this thing off the ground with a regional focus. And my question to staff is, it talks about expanding an existing service. Wouldn't this have to be a new standalone service? How does that work?
Certainly, Lisa or Alana can jump in, but I think what we've tried to do is identify that there's many agricultural activities in existing services. And then I forget which appendix it is, but one of the appendixes identifies those activities that we do not have the authority for under existing services. So I think that's what's been trying to be portrayed there, is that there are many services that we do provide that have either some influence or overlap with agricultural activities. But there's other agricultural activities for which we have no authority and which we would recommend.
So we're not putting it all into one house then?
The proposal for year one of the agricultural coordinator, as noted in Appendix C, would be focusing on those agricultural activities for which we already have services in place.
And you talk about, you know, what you see as the role. From reading the document, it's a lot about communication, a lot about information, hosting webs, print media, all that kind of stuff, which is more HR than anything else. Or not HR, sorry. Yeah, communications. Liaise with senior government. That's a big piece of it because we always go hat in hand to senior government for money to do just about anything. Now, would that be better served if it would be better served, I guess, if we went as a regional district, but you know, I just have a niggling distrust of the urban areas getting involved in this because they really don't grasp it. So, you know, you can say what you want, but there is that disconnect there. Yeah. So I don't know. I'm more in favor of seeing if we can get this thing at least for the year or two and gather all the information we got to gather, compile all that stuff, crunch all that stuff, and then we'll have a better idea where we really want to go with this in the long haul. Director Hardy.
Yeah, thanks, Sharon. I appreciate your comments and thoughts there. I am just wondering, in the document, I guess moving forward, you know, if we're looking at establishing a farmer's market and you know, a permanent farmer's market home and food processing / food hub, obviously there's going to be a cost associated with that. And, you know, obviously long-term debt will probably have to be brought on. Is that something that is mentioned in the document with regards to, again, a need for taking on long-term debt and whether that's something that we can do? in a rural agriculture service instead of a.
Well, none of it's
regional
all over the
service.
place. You couldn't get a loan authorization by law if you, could you? I mean, you got 5 or 6 different services.
Maybe Lisa or Alan, if you can weigh in on those potential activities, permanent location for farmers market, the food aggregation location, those types of activities, and where that is envisioned within the work plan and those tasks and priorities.
Just before staff answers that question, through the chair to the CEO, I guess I just want to make sure, if those activities are going to occur, that it's communicated in the document that, long-term debt may be needed to occur for those activities. Have we communicated that clearly enough in this document, I guess?
I think the way I would answer that is that this is a strategic document that's at a fairly high level. And it sets out a vision and tasks to achieve some of those vision items. And there's a lot of details that are going to be needed as we proceed and as we progress. And to answer questions like the long-term debt and those specifics, I think those are a lot of the details that we would have to explore and understand as we move forward. This document certainly doesn't give authority or commit towards those pieces, and I know that's not what you're asking. But I think those are really detail-focused components of achieving some of these vision statements and tasks identified. And I say that not to divert from your question, but I also think it would be helpful to hear from either Alana or Lisa on the sequencing and timing around some of those very substantive tasks that could be on the horizon.
Through the chair to the directors, I think we'll probably tag team on this one. But I guess just to bring it back to what we're looking for from you today is, I think we've heard it, which is that support for the idea of the ag coordinator, right? And so critical, we see that as a critical component to any implementation, whether it be rural or regional. So once we get that resource in place, our suggestion to you would be that that person focus on the task or the functions that Ione has described in the report in Appendix 3 of her report. And really that role in this next year, these months ahead, is to work with the farming community to understand how best we should move forward in implementing the plan. So some of these big questions about, do we need to be able to have borrowing capacity? Do we need to be able to bring in other partners? Which partners are they? This is the critical work that we see unfolding under that coordinator in the first months and up to a year of that portfolio. So the tasks that we've identified in the green, as Lisa has noted, they can occur in across various services. Some of those services would have borrowing capacity. For those larger tasks, such as working with the Farmers Market Association to identify a permanent location, that's a yellow task on here where we're saying we don't have a service right now that could resource that or borrow or any of those other pieces. So those yellow tasks could be, if you were contemplating purpose of an agricultural service, if you were thinking about establishing a new service, be it rural or regional, the idea would be that you could use those yellow tasks to help flesh out what that purpose is over these next months with an ag coordinator in place. We also want to impress that we receive so much involvement and meaningful input from Farmers Institute, Farmers Market Association and others, that we really want those organizations to help us understand how to drive this plan forward. As you well know, they've got the expertise, and really what we're suggesting is we want to continue to work with them to find the best ways to move these pieces forward. We don't want to suggest to you that the CVRD is the one who should identify where the farmers market, a permanent farmers market, should go. We really believe that that rests with the market association and with those other experts in the field. This is really about support. So our suggestion to you today, the critical course of action, or that first important step, is through the financial planning process to consider funding the agricultural coordinator. And then these next important pieces we see we'll put concerted effort into working with the experts in the field, quite literally, to flesh out how we move forward on implementation of some of these bigger pieces. Anything further, Lisa?
Director Arbor?
Yep, that was very helpful and clarifying from staff, so thank you. Yeah, I'm ready to move on both recommendations today, and maybe my final question is just is what are we doing with Hornby and Denman? Because I represent these two communities, and Denman has a pretty mature agricultural plan. Hornby has various initiatives without a plan. And they're great initiatives actually, but I'm just wondering in that rural versus regional service and all that, whether thought was given by staff as to whether you would give consideration to Hornby and Denman.
So I think from a food systems perspective, it makes sense to, to include them as we move forward in these actions. And identifying them as partners, or where further support of the board and certain advocacy may also support the work that they're doing on the islands. I think, again, with an agricultural coordinator, we then have a resource that we can actually start to explore all of the additional groups that we need to bring along in terms of the plan. And certainly the islands, while there's an existing plan there's certain aspects in our plan that may not be relevant, in terms of land use and things like that. Certainly from a sector growth and strengthening and broad regional food security perspective, I think that it's important.
Director Arbor?
Yeah, thanks. That's good comments, but mine was much more direct, which is would we actually get the properties into the service paying for it or not, and you don't need the answer today. I'm just flagging it that could come up later on. Because obviously the Islands Trust did not have the ability to create an agricultural, so maybe some consultation later on in the next year could be, doesn't have to be extensive, but it's hard to know even who to engage on the islands because they don't have necessarily those formal organizations. Yeah.
Okay, my only feeling is that when you talk about section 3.31, I mean, the director brought up, it does talk about regional agricultural service or as an anchor asset, maximizing the use of CVR's existing land and assets such as the exhibition grounds. And I find it odd as well that the Exhibition Association isn't included in this discussion. Should be accommodated for the benefit of the agri-food sector. This could involve developing a specific list of needs and wants. And I'm looking for this on the specific needs and wants, because I only will testify that the Comox Valley Farmers Institute has been quite direct on this, and she does have all the submissions. And it's only under the, it says it needs and wants for agriculture community at the CVEX location in brackets, e.g. And then it goes permanent market space, feed, hay storage, seed saving, shared processing space, etc. Well, I would be happy if we could insert something in the EG, which is possible, like a possible center for farmers, or something to that effect, something that a possible center farming for, I think somebody called it the Center for Farming Excellence, but a possible center for the farming community, or something along that line, just to raise it a little bit above the others, et cetera. So if everybody can support me on that, I can support the rest. And also, like I say, okay, that's great. If we can do we need to make that as an amendment to this? I guess we do.
Yeah.
Okay, we can move it with that amendment on it. Yeah, so we get to that. Because I think that would bring comfort to a lot of the farming communities. Some of them maybe aren't as focused on it, but when you talk about permanent market space, I think Twyla's talking about a big pole structure, some kind of a not necessarily an all-weather structure, but something to extend their season a little bit farther into the winter, especially put vinyl up or whatever on it. And, shared processing space, if we're going to go down that road, then, obviously we need a building to house it. It's been on the plan for a long, long time. And it only fell off, I think, when we were absorbed into the recreation function. So then again, that's one of my reasons why I'm biased towards making it a regional system, because it just goes off from the original intent. So if we can put that in there, then I will support it. So that brings us to on receipt. Anybody opposed to receipt? That carries. And the recommendation with the one amendment? It's kind of hard. It's in the middle of a 27-page document. Well, it's when it says bullet number 3.1, this could involve developing a specific list of needs and wants from the agricultural community at the CVEX location, in brackets, e.g. Possible center for farming, permanent market space, feed and hay storage, seed saving, shared processing space, etc., etc. The little building on the hill, it's suddenly appearing again. Okay. Good. We're okay? Okay, so on number 1, we get first and second on it? Okay, then we're ready to go. Any opposed? That carries. And recommendation number 2, we want to clarify that? Are we gonna, it's still gonna fall under the same planning function for now, right? So it's gonna be a real job to begin with. Okay. You second it? Okay. All right. Any discussion, Director?
Yeah, so earlier I made comments kind of somewhat contrary to that recommendation, yet I move it. It's partly, I think it would be ideal to have a regional service, but staff explained some of the avenues that this is not the service, this is a coordination position for year 1. But I have to say, come budget time, I will look for items on the work plan that are rural specific. And I think that's subtract a bit from the ag, because I think if we're going to have the conversation with the broader regions, for example, on the support to permanent farmers market, that should be regional in my opinion. So I would hope that that's not a focus in year 1 for the person. And maybe the person can just look at regulations and ALR issues and all those kinds of things that are purely rural and get something going. And maybe that will inspire the municipalities to want to join our emerging effort. So yeah, so I'll support. Thanks.
And Director Harney?
Yeah, thanks. And I think, again, just going back to that, the bottom part of recommendation number 2, that says that the Comox Valley Agriculture Plan will be referred to the board for discussion about regional implementation interests, I think is important. I think that to a certain degree kind of puts forward Director Arbor's concerns about trying to get the regional folks involved in this process as well down the road. So I think that bullet there is quite relevant in regards to how we would like to see things moving forward with local governments as well participating in this process down the road, maybe. Thanks.
All right. So are we moving and seconded on that? So we're ready to go? So on recommendation 2, anybody opposed? then that carries. And one of the big things about agriculture is water infrastructure. And here's a water infrastructure granting opportunity, a report from December the 10th. Moving second on receipt and over to Alana.
Yeah, thanks, Alana Malali, our General Manager of Planning and Development Services, will be introducing this report.
Great. Thanks very much, James. And through the chair to the directors, some time ago, you asked us to look into a couple of grant opportunities that were available around providing water or access to water for agricultural use. Specifically, we looked at two, being I'm just going to get the names right here, the Water Security Fund, and then the second being the Investment Agriculture Foundation's Water Infrastructure Program. So that first fund, that's now closed, but we didn't see any real opportunities for us within the scope of that program. Where we would see greater opportunity would be within the IAF's program, which has an open intake until those funds are expended. So since you gave us this direction to report back, we've met with Ione and our regional agrologist, Tom O'Dell, with the Ministry of Agriculture to talk about what an application could look like. So our understanding of the briefing, of course, would be those opportunities for the CVRD to assist in increasing either access to or supply of water for agricultural use. Although we don't have a project scoped at this time, we are looking back at the work that we completed in 2021 in the Solon watershed, and are having those conversations with ministry staff and our consultant about potential project scoping. So there is no recommendation in this report today. We just wanted to let you know that we are looking into it and we will come back to you early in 2025. We'd like to have a further conversation with the Farmers Institute in particular, given their interest in the Institute brought some questions to you directors around whether or not there could be a role for the CVRD. And so we will report back if there is a project that emerges, and if this fund seems like a good source of resources. Thank you.
Okay, it's just on receipt. Any opposed? Carried. And now, this is the last of the 2024 Rural Community Grant requests that came in a little late from the Oyster River Enhancement Society. Move in second.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and I'll introduce Doug DeMarzo, our General Manager of Community Services, to introduce this brief report. Doug.
What are you, Doug?
Good morning, and through the chair. As you've indicated, this will be the last time we look at rural community grants in 2024. This was a late application by the Oyster River Enhancement Society. They're requesting $10,000 to complete their Chum Channel project that they've been working on throughout the year, specifically around predator control fencing. It should be noted that this organization has been a longtime partner of the CVRD at a Bear Creek Nature Park and has done a lot of great work in the fisheries over the years. As such, you have a remaining funds of $38,369 in your various grant services. Specifically to Electoral Area C, there's a remainder of $12,366. And as in the past, this is just the one application, but we leave it to the director's discretion to discuss the application and indicate how they want and if they want to fund this project. Available for any questions.
Any questions, directors? Well, this is the last of our remaining funds. I'm quite willing to put the whole 10 grand in from Area C. Unless anybody else has other thoughts. Question though, just to Doug, did they also request a early release of funds? Or because this falls under the 2024, does that mean we release the funds right away? Because it's already past the August deadline?
Yeah, we'll be releasing the funds
So it's redundant.
once conclusions made on this.
Okay, perfect. And Director Hardy.
Yeah, area will be a kicking $2,500.
Thank you very much. You're a chum. You get the button that says the chum of chums. I'm a chum for chums. Well, that's very generous. That leaves me with a little bit of money. So as it's as it exists. Any other discussion? I think that's fine.
7,500 from area C and 2,500 from area B to confirm. Thank you.
Confirm. Anyone opposed to that? That carries. And that brings us to the end of the meeting. So a motion to adjourn to the in-camera portion. And we will take a little recess. Thank you very much, everyone.